Cota's local workshops were held in Marseille in collaboration with a local association called Sindian. We met the, their target group, who are basically ladies between 40 and 60 years old, coming all of them from Syria, were refugees and came either together with their families, partly with their families, with their children or husbands, 2 or 4 years ago. The workshops began with an introductory phase where I showed them what we're going to do. The basic idea was to create traveling objects, migratory objects, such as jewelry. Why jewelry? Because jewelry is a small object. It can be considered as a small artwork. And within our society, when people are, most of them, or many of them, more or less, in constant movement from country to country, not only because they are migrants or refugees, but it's part of our contemporary lifestyle, traveling. So jewelry is basically a medium that is easy to take with oneself as a souvenir or as something we are really attached to. So after introducing them the technique in a few words and a general idea, we went to visit an exhibition in the Vieille Charité in Marseille, which is a really nice museum. It's an old, it used to be a hospital, and it was transformed into a museum. They really liked the place because it's also a little bit, it reminds a little bit les Khan, les caravanserai, medieval hostels, let's say, from an architectural point of view. The exhibition we visited was about migratory objects in a large sense of the word, meaning also recycling, but there were really interesting parts as well about what kind of objects people take with them when they leave their countries. Beautiful photographs accompanied by stories that were recorded, and we could listen to them why they've chosen, for example, a sword or a suitcase that belonged to someone's mother when they moved to France. But the most striking thing was probably the artworks coming from other cultures, not European and not Islamic, not Arabic background, but the ladies were, I think, the most fascinated, as they told me afterwards, by the Mexican part. And they all realized that Mexican art, it represents a very different aesthetics from there and from the one that they discovered here living in France. It was a nice experience, and talking about these artworks also created a kind of complicity between us and between them as well. And I would like to mention this funny side of the thing, that when we visited the African part of the exhibition, we saw these small African statues where masculine statues, sex is represented as a kind of I don't know how to say, a small wooden stick, and they were really fascinated about it, and we loved about it a lot. So it has created a kind of complicity and a feminine humor between us in spite of cultural differences. And I went there with the idea that I'm not a teacher, so I'm a trainer, but I won't give too much information about anything. I wanted them to discover things themselves, but when we were there, I just realized that they were really eager and really curious to know things and to learn things. So I just went and tried to translate all of the subtitles and descriptions of the artworks. The aim of this part of this series of workshops that we conceived is to discover basically local art and local culture, local visual culture. But the funny thing was that we didn't really discover anything about local culture, but from from third cultures, let's say, not Islamic, not Arabic, and not French either. And this thing has created a kind of external point of view, which was I think very useful, especially afterwards, because the second part of the workshop consisted of asking them to collect materials from their home. So the instruction while we visited the exhibition was to take photos, but not any kind of photos, photos of details, which could be either colors, either patterns, um, either just materials that they liked or that they reminded them something. And then they had to repeat the same exercise at home. And this way of approaching artworks coming from elsewhere and coming from one's own culture create really interesting links, and they do things um, on the same level, so it becomes in a certain way equal Mexican art and Islamic art, and why not. So this discovery part's aim is only to feel at home and to move freely in the different spaces, the public spaces of the hosting country or the hosting culture. And it's not easy at all. I mean, just imagine that you come from elsewhere and you don't speak the local language. And this is not the only problem, because in France, when you're unemployed, for instance, or you have a financial aid from the state, you have the right to visit museums without paying. So it's free. But of course, you need to have the documents. But today, to have documents, it's not so easy. I mean, it's not just a piece of paper, but you need to subscribe, to download an application, and then to retain your passwords and put them to the right place, and then choose the right option on a site. So if you're not used to it, even if you're used to it, sometimes it can be quite difficult. Even if you speak the language, it can be difficult. But just imagine, it's not only one simple task to to make something in a language that you don't speak perfectly, but there are several tasks at the same time. So all these obstacles all are also linked in some way to our projects, because we also try to help people to get better in dealing with digital tools. And it's very important. But these digital tools, I think we have to imagine like something really simple at the first time. So not creating a website, but to share images, for example, to create a group on WhatsApp or on Facebook, and to share images. It's already a step forward in developing digital skills. So after this first part, as I said, the second part was an independent blended work, when they had to repeat the same process of taking pictures of details at home, from clothes, from objects, anything that come from their local culture. So the second part, the creative part of the workshop, began with the spices. So we already had a nice big breaking part with Isis at the very, very beginning of our first meeting, when I showed them the techniques that we were about to use during the creative phase. But this time we also tried to find out, because some women, some ladies who were present at the second part of the workshop, they were not there at the first part. So I just repeated a little bit this exercise of smelling the different spices, trying to find out where they come from, discovering their textures, their colors, etc., etc. I also presented a little bit the link, so just explain why we are doing this. The only aim is not to create small beautiful things, but to create a link between all that we saw in the exhibition or the photos we took at home, and try to recreate something meaningful, a kind of souvenir of something we liked. So to demonstrate the technique, I suggested, for example, to get inspired of the Mexican artworks, or with all these different colors at the same time. And to do this, we used also different colorful spices, and we mixed together to create something very vivid. So we used resin and spices, but also colorful pencils. I will show you the details later on in a tutorial. I think they really liked the exercise, so they were really in it. The same as the first time, they were really eager to learn the new techniques, how to do it correctly, how to use this UV resin, how to mix colors, how to finalize them. The benefit of this exercise, they considered that it was also a kind of art therapy. So let's say the common thing, the common work was that we basically all created very colorful small symbols that were inspired both by symbols of their own culture of origin, but also from things we saw during the exhibition. What could be better the next time, probably when I make such a workshop again. So what I would change, I would make it longer. So I would meet ladies more than twice, and we would deal with the same subject, because there was something missing, I think. So this is a nice thing, even to build up a whole program for 1 year or for several months. This way of alternating discovery phase and creative phase. So the discovery phase, it's about discovering the local, not only the local visual culture, but the local public spaces, to feel at ease moving around in it, to be conscious of all these technical details, like having the documents needed to go to visit an exhibition, or to be familiar with the city itself, to move around, to go to places where they have never been before, or how to interact with anyone, with the lady selling the tickets. So all these things are quite useful, and on the other hand, to really integrate what we saw and to really make part of it, uh, then we use this creative learning process. So we learn through creating things ourselves, and we personalize the experience through creation. Um, but what would be even nicer just to have this the discovery phase, then a technical part where they really get familiar with the materials we are going to use, and then uh, there could be a third part, a creative phase, when really we could link together and think about it more deeply, about the connections and the possibilities to integrate things we saw into our own artworks. But as I told, it was a first experience, and it happened also in Marseille. And well, it's not the same, I think, organizing a workshop in Marseille or in Germany, for instance. So if you begin a workshop at 10, or if you plan to begin the workshop at 10, you have to be prepared that okay, we'll begin between 10 and 11:30 probably. So you have to be cool and just try to profit, to make it beneficial this time, while you are waiting for the others. So you cannot be very strict, or about you have must be, on the contrary, quite flexible about things that you want them to make. I also wanted to mention the linguistic potential of these creative workshop sessions. So, of course, the workshop was in Arabic, but of course there were words I didn't know in Arabic, and then we tried to find out how to translate things, and then we repeated the same word several times, some technical terms. Um, well, for instance, there was this new word. It was new for them in French, and it was new for me in Arabic. The word tamima, or talisman, in talisman in French. So we, as we repeated, and we laughed about it, and there were quite misunderstandings as well about the term. So it's something for sure we won't forget. So it has some benefits from a linguistic point of view as well. There is also something new I learned. So I think originally we imagined that we created an encounter between local culture and culture of origin, but probably, and this is what I experienced, this encounter can be even more successful if it goes through artworks coming from a third culture, from a third visual culture. So this is why this Mexican statues and live trees, what we saw in the exhibition, was something very useful from this point of view. So we are externalizing our judgment, let's say, and we are both um, as admirative, or as curious to discover something new that is new for both of us, uh, as a European woman or as a Syrian woman. And this creates also an encounter which is even more interesting, maybe, or let's say it's a it's a good starting point to speak about things uh, from an equal point of view. The original idea was also to orientate a little bit this discovery phase, to let them see objects where elements from their own culture of origin are recycled and reused in a new context. Because I think it's really something uh, valorizing for them. This we didn't see in this particular exhibition, but it was not. it was not a big problem at the end. And I tried to compensate this lack by showing them a few of my own works, so jewelry, for example, or this wooden box I create where I recycle Islamic sacred geometric art. And the plan is really to continue this adventure. So, from a practical point of view, it's not so easy because they are in Marseille and I live in Paris for now. But we are planning to continue this adventure from autumn. But we have to think about these practical questions still.